You are standing in the grocery store at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and you are tired. Not just from the day, from the decades. You have been told that fat was the enemy, then that carbs were the enemy, then that sugar was the enemy, then that seed oils were the enemy. You have watched the nutrition aisle rearrange itself around each new fear, and you have dutifully moved your cart to the right section. You bought the rice cakes in 1994. You bought the agave nectar in 2012. You bought the veggie chips last Thursday. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet question has been forming, one you have not quite let yourself ask out loud. What if some of these replacements are actually worse on the specific thing you were worried about than the foods they replaced? That is not a conspiracy. Nobody is hiding anything. The information is on the label, literally, on the back of the package, in the federally mandated Nutrition Facts panel. The problem is that the front of the package is louder than the back, and the front of the package has a marketing budget. Here is what the evidence shows, item by item. Not what a podcast says, not what a wellness influencer says, not what the packaging art implies. What the peer-reviewed literature and the federal nutrition databases actually document when you compare these foods side by side. Let's start with the sweetener. Agave nectar arrived in American kitchens sometime in the mid-2000s, positioned as the natural, plant-based, low-glycemic alternative to both table sugar and high-fructose corn syrup. If you bought it, you probably bought it specifically because you were worried about HFCS. The marketing leaned hard on two words, natural and low glycemic. Both are technically accurate, and both are misleading in ways that matter. Agave syrup is derived from the agave plant. It is processed through industrial refinement. The sap is extracted, filtered, heated, and enzymatically treated to convert its complex sugars into simple ones. The end product is a syrup composed primarily of fructose. Commercial agave syrup typically contains 70 to 85% fructose, depending on the processing method and the specific product. For comparison, table sugar is 50% fructose and 50% glucose, a clean split. High fructose corn syrup, the one in the soft drinks, the one you were worried about, is approximately 55% fructose in its most common formulation, called HFCS 55. So the sweetener you bought to replace HFCS delivers significantly more fructose per spoonful than the thing it replaced, on the specific metric that made people nervous about high fructose corn syrup in the first place. Now, why does the fructose fraction matter? Because fructose and glucose are metabolized differently. Glucose enters the bloodstream and is used by cells throughout the body, with insulin managing traffic. Fructose takes a different route. It is metabolized almost entirely in the liver. Hepatic fructose metabolism bypasses the regulatory step, phosphofructokinase, that governs glucose processing, which means the liver handles fructose without the same feedback controls. At high enough doses, this activates a process called de novo lipogenesis. The liver converts the excess fructose into fat. A 2009 randomized controlled trial by Stanhope and colleagues, published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation, found that overweight adults consuming 25% of their calories as fructose-sweetened beverages showed increased visceral fat, elevated triglycerides, and decreased insulin sensitivity compared with a glucose-sweetened control group over 10 weeks. That is a real finding. It is also an extreme dose. 25% of total calories from fructose is far beyond what anyone gets from stirring agave into their tea. And that distinction matters. A 2012 systematic review and meta-analysis in the Annals of Internal Medicine by Piper and colleagues examined 31 controlled feeding trials and found that when fructose simply replaced other carbohydrates at the same calorie level. It did not worsen metabolic markers. The problems emerged when fructose was added on top of existing intake. Excess calories, not fructose itself, driving the effect. So the honest version is this: agave nectar is not a health food. It delivers more fructose than the sweetener it was marketed against. At typical use levels, a drizzle in tea, a spoonful on oatmeal, the metabolic consequences are modest. But the health halo is a lie. The low glycemic index printed on the label is real, and it is real precisely because fructose does not spike blood glucose the way glucose does. It enters a different pathway. Low glycemic index does not mean metabolically harmless. It means the harm, if any, does not show up on a glucometer. The diet book is not the same thing as the evidence. Now take that fructose lesson and apply it to the next aisle, the juice aisle. Because fruit juice is the same metabolic story told in a different container, and the evidence here is even stronger. A medium orange contains about 62 calories, 12 grams of sugar, and 3 grams of dietary fiber. 8 ounces of commercial orange juice contains about 110 calories, 26 grams of sugar, and roughly half a gram of fiber. The sugar nearly doubles. The fiber drops by 80%. And that fiber was not decoration. It was doing specific physiological work, slowing gastric emptying, delaying glucose absorption in the small intestine, attenuating the blood sugar spike after eating. When you remove the fiber from fruit, you keep the sugar and remove the mechanism that made the sugar manageable. That is what juicing is, biochemically. Here is where the numbers get uncomfortable. 8 ounces of Coca-Cola Classic contains approximately 26 grams of sugar. 8 ounces of commercial orange juice, 26 grams. 8 ounces of apple juice, 28 grams. The sugar content of 100% fruit juice is comparable to cola on a per-volume basis. The USDA Food Data Central Database documents this. It is not a controversial claim. It is a measurement. A 2013 prospective cohort meta-analysis published in the BMJ, drawing on data from the Nurses' Health Study, the Nurses' Health Study 2, and the Health Professionals' Follow-Up Study, a combined population of over 187,000 people followed for a median of 24 years, found that consuming 1 or more servings of fruit juice per day was associated with a 21% increase in type 2 diabetes risk. Consuming whole fruit, by contrast, was associated with reduced risk. This is observational data. It cannot prove causation, and confounders exist. But the signal is consistent across 3 independent large cohorts, and it runs in the direction the biochemistry would predict. The American Academy of Pediatrics updated its guidance in 2017. The clinical report, published in Pediatrics, states directly, fruit juice offers no nutritional benefit over whole fruit for infants and children. The AAP now recommends no juice at all for children under 12 months and strict limits for older children. The 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans went further, classifying 100% fruit juice as a beverage to limit, placing it alongside added sugar beverages, not alongside whole fruit. If you grew up being told that juice was the healthy drink, that guidance has been formally revised. Many parents pouring juice into sippy cups do not know this. The health halo on the juice box is decades old, and the evidence moved out from under it. Pattern beats nutrient. Every time. Which brings us to the snack aisle, and to 2 products that illustrate a different kind of mismatch. Not metabolic, but compositional. Rice cakes and veggie chips are not fructose stories. They are label-reading stories. Rice cakes became a dieting staple in the late 1980s and early 1990s, positioned as a low-calorie, light alternative to bread and crackers. The calorie claim is real. A standard rice cake is roughly 35 calories. What is not real is the assumption many people make, that because rice cakes are low-calorie, they must be gentle on blood sugar. The glycemic index of a plain puffed rice cake is approximately 82, according to the International Tables of Glycemic Index and Glycemic Load Values published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2008. The definitive academic GI reference, developed at the University of Sydney. White bread, in the same tables, comes in at approximately 70 to 75. The snack people chose, specifically to avoid blood sugar spikes, has a higher glycemic index than the bread it replaced. The reason is straightforward food science. The puffing process gelatinizes the starch, dramatically increasing the surface area available to digestive enzymes, which means faster breakdown to glucose. A qualification is necessary here, and it is an important one. Glycemic index is measured under controlled conditions. Fasted subjects consuming 50 grams of available carbohydrate from a single food in isolation. Real meals are not eaten that way. If you put almond butter on a rice cake, the fat and protein slow the glucose response substantially. The American Diabetes Association's 2023 Standards of Medical Care notes that glycemic index is one tool among many and should be considered alongside overall dietary patterns, not used in isolation. So the clinical significance of the rice cake versus white bread GI difference depends on context, what you eat with it, what the rest of your day looks like, whether you are managing a blood sugar condition. But the perception that rice cakes are a blood sugar-friendly carbohydrate, that is not supported by the measurement. They are low-calorie and high glycemic index. Those are not the same thing. Now, veggie chips. This one is simpler, and in some ways more striking, because the answer is on the ingredient list. Not buried, not hidden. Right there, in the order the FDA requires. Ingredients listed by weight, from most to least. Pick up a bag of the leading commercial veggie chip or veggie straw products, the ones with the green packaging and the pictures of spinach and tomatoes, and read from the top. Ingredient 1 is typically potato starch or potato flour. Ingredient 2 is often cornstarch. Ingredient 3 is usually oil. And somewhere near the bottom, after the salt, after the sugar, you will find spinach powder, tomato powder, beet powder, the vegetables that gave the product its name, its color, and its shelf placement in the health food section. The Center for Science in the Public Interest, a nonprofit nutrition watchdog, analyzed multiple veggie chip products and found calorie densities of 130 to 150 calories per ounce, comparable to standard potato chips at roughly 150 calories per ounce. The fat content is typically identical. The frying process uses the same oils at the same temperatures. Marion Nestle, Professor Emerita of Nutrition at New York University, has put this plainly in academic contexts. The marketing of food is not the same as the nutritional quality of food. Vegetable imagery sells products. It does not make products vegetables. The veggie in veggie chips is mostly a color. Read the ingredient list from the top. There is an exception worth noting. Some products, actual dehydrated kale chips, baked beet slices, real sweet potato chips, use whole vegetable slices and have genuinely different fiber and micronutrient profiles. They are typically more expensive and clearly identifiable. The critique here is of the mainstream veggie chip category, where potato starch is the primary ingredient and vegetable powder is present in trace amounts, not of every product with a vegetable on the bag. And now, the last one. The one that might be the most disorienting, because it actually does contain something genuinely beneficial. Granola has oats. Rolled oats contain beta-glucan fiber, which has a real evidence base. A 2014 meta-analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that 3 grams per day of beta-glucan from oats was associated with modest LDL cholesterol reductions. The oats are not the problem. The problem is everything else in the bowl. Since the FDA updated the Nutrition Facts Panel in 2020, added sugars are now listed separately from total sugars on the label. Pick up a bag of commercial granola, the major retail brands most people buy, and look at that line. A standard serving, which is roughly 2/3 of a cup, typically delivers 12 to 18 grams of added sugar. Some flavored varieties reach 22 to 25 grams per serving. The American Heart Association recommends a maximum of 25 grams of added sugar per day for women and 36 grams per day for men. A single serving of high-sugar commercial granola consumes virtually the entire daily AHA allowance for women in one bowl. For reference, a standard Snickers bar contains approximately 27 grams of total sugar. On the specific metric of added sugar per serving, commercial granola at the higher end of the range competes with confectionery. This is not a claim that a Snickers bar is healthier than granola. A Snickers bar has saturated fat and lower fiber. The comparison is narrow and must be understood as narrow. On the dimension of added sugar alone, the health food and the candy bar are closer than anyone standing in the cereal aisle would guess. And there is another layer. Multiple consumer analyses have documented that the listed serving size of granola, that 2/3 of a cup, is smaller than what most people actually pour. In studies of cereal portioning behavior, consumers typically pour 1.5 to 2 times the listed serving, which means the sugar intake doubles from what the label already shows. Granola's health reputation is built on oats. The oats are still there. They are surrounded. Most supplements exist because supplements sell. Most health halos exist because halos sell. So what is the pattern across all 5 of these? It is not that food companies are conspiring against you. It is simpler and more structural than that. The marketing language on the front of the package, natural, veggie, whole grain, 100% fruit, low glycemic, is designed to create a health association. That association is not regulated at the same level as a specific nutrient claim. The FDA regulates statements like low fat or high fiber with defined thresholds. But the general impression created by a product's name, its packaging art, and its shelf placement in the health food section, that operates in a regulatory gap. A product can be named after a vegetable it barely contains, marketed as natural when it is industrially refined, and shelved next to the supplements without triggering any labeling violation. A 2007 study in the Journal of Consumer Research by Chandon and Wansink demonstrated the downstream effect. When consumers perceive a food as healthy, they systematically underestimate its calorie content by 21 to 38% and are more likely to add high-calorie sides. The health halo does not just mislead about the product, it changes behavior around the product. The 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans offer the clearest corrective, and it is not complicated. Whole, minimally processed foods consistently outperform processed alternatives across the evidence base, regardless of health claims on packaging. The guideline rationale is that whole foods preserve the food matrix, the physical structure that modulates how nutrients are absorbed, how satiety is triggered, how the metabolic response unfolds. Processing disrupts that matrix. Sometimes the disruption is minor, Sometimes it removes the fiber that made the sugar safe, or gelatinizes the starch that made the carbohydrate slow, or replaces actual vegetables with vegetable-colored potato starch. Food is culture before it is chemistry, and the foods you grew up with, whatever tradition they come from, were not designed by a marketing department. They were shaped by generations of people feeding their families with what was available, and most traditional food patterns, when researchers actually study them, hold up remarkably well against the processed alternatives that claim to improve on them. If an influencer is telling you that a food your grandmother made is wrong, and that a packaged product with a health claim is right, the probability that the influencer is wrong is high. If you are managing a specific condition, diabetes, cardiovascular risk, a diagnosed metabolic concern, the general evidence in this video applies, but the individualized piece belongs to a conversation with a registered dietitian. That is an RD or RDN, a credentialed, regulated professional with specific clinical training. The title nutritionist is unregulated in many states. Anyone can use it. The credential to look for is registered dietitian. They are the evidence-trained partner for the questions that a YouTube video cannot and should not answer. For the rest of it, for the Tuesday night grocery run, for the label you are holding in your hand right now, the move is small, and it is free. Turn the package around. Read the nutrition facts panel. Read the ingredient list from the top. Ignore the front of the package entirely if you want to. It is advertising, and it is doing its job well. The whole orange instead of the juice. The oatmeal instead of the granola. The actual vegetables instead of the vegetable-colored chip. The pattern is consistent and boring and undramatic, and supported by the broadest evidence base in nutrition science. The whole food form outperforms the processed version, every time, across every category, regardless of what the package says. That is not a diet. It is not a program. It is not a subscription. It is 30 seconds of label reading in a grocery aisle, applied with the calm understanding that the front of the package is a sales pitch and the back of the package is the evidence. You get to decide what you eat. The evidence is a tool, not a prescription. And the next time you pick up a product that says natural or veggie or whole grain or low glycemic, turn it around. The answer is usually right there in the small print, waiting for you to look. What food did you swap for a healthier version and later found out the swap did not hold up? Put it in the comments, not to shame anyone, but because every one of those stories is someone else's grocery aisle moment, and sharing it might save them the trip. Subscribe if you want the version that reads the label instead of the marketing. No diet prescriptions, no supplement pitches, no moralizing, just the evidence, calmly, and the respect you deserve as someone who can read a number and make your own choice.